Hello,
Hello, hello.
I'm Butch,
I'm Dave.
and we're back looking at point number 3 of the Psalms and Psalmists, Psalms in context. Point number 3 is Family Feud.
Family Feud.
Yes.
Not the good kind, though.
Not the good kind, the bad kind, the real kind, the actual kind. We're looking at Absalom's coup d'etat. Originally, David just said Absalom's coup. I thought that's fine, but let's go French. Let's go the whole way.
Yeah.
Coup d'etat.
No half measures.
That's right. So Psalm 3 is the psalm that we'll be looking at, and we'll be putting that psalm into context. Let's begin.
With the context.
With the context.
Sweet deal. Yeah. We're in 2 Samuel again.
That's right.
We're picking up exactly where we left off. The fallout of David's sin, first with adultery with Bathsheba and then arranging for the death of her husband. All of that fallout is in the preceding chapters, and in chapter 12, we have Nathan confronting David and the judgment, which is the death of the child that is conceived during that act of adultery.
Yeah, and not just that, but also like it says in verse 11 of chapter 12, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house.
Yes.
And I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. For you did it secretly, but I do this before all Israel. So I think that's pretty interesting. It's kind of foretelling this whole event that we're going to be looking at.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, even if that hadn't have been there, I think we would be justified to see a kind of connection of cause at least the level of psychology, of family, of the social effects of David's sin, because what follows in chapter 13 is another egregious example of sexual predation. One of David's sons, named Amnon, develops an obsession with his half-sister, Tamar. And it's not right. It's wrong. Everything's wrong about that.
And his uncle kind of helps him out, right?
Yeah, it's weird. It's bad.
The whole thing is just everything's unraveling. It's like going to a family reunion and you realize, oh, this is where this took place. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, they haven't had really good examples at home, I guess is the point.
True.
But also this is egregious. We shouldn't, we're not trying to nerf it in any way. This is awful. So that when over the course of that chapter, Amnon arranges an occasion where he can be alone, he fakes illness, where he can be alone with her, and so take advantage of her, and then having done so, casts her out, scorns her. Is it any wonder that her brother, Absalom, Amnon's half-brother, starts plotting?
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah, he's angry. He's very, very angry, and rightfully so.
Yeah. He doesn't confront him directly, though. Probably because David doesn't confront him directly. It says in verse 21 of chapter 13 that when David heard all these things, he was very angry. That's all it says.
Yeah.
So this is, to use a word that's, so hot of late. This is a toxic environment.
Yeah.
A lot of toxicity going on in this family.
Right. And a full 2 years later is when he begins to actually start to deal with this and confront and actually murder. Absalom murders his brother Amnon at that point.
Yeah. In a way that actually mirrors the way that Amnon operates. Amnon operates by deception. He sets up an occasion in which his sister is present with him on a pretext so that he can take advantage of her unawares, so that he can catch her by surprise. And Absalom pays him back in kind, throws a party, invites him to it as a guest of honor, and then stabs him at the party, or has him stabbed, let's be fair. And Absalom has a guy for that.
That's right. So then Absalom flees, right? He flees from Jerusalem, and he's gone for a little while. He doesn't want to face what he's done. He doesn't want to face David. And then, what is it, 2 more years later he comes back?
David rightly is upset that one of his sons has murdered one of his other sons. I would have hoped that he would have been at least this upset about the other awful violation, but he treats Absalom as an outcast. Absalom is in exile, essentially, but eventually through the intervention of a number of people, including Joab, Joab is a super important character in the life of David. He's essentially David's head general, kind of the head of his bodyguard, maybe the head of the Secret Service. He's like all those guys rolled up into one surly character of sketchy repute. More than one murder is laid at the feet of Joab in the books of Samuel, the 2 books of Samuel. But eventually, a reconciliation between David and Absalom is arranged in chapter 14. He's brought back to Jerusalem and finally readmitted into David's presence, at which point he immediately begins plotting again.
Yeah, he lives there for a couple of years, and he really starts getting the favor of the people. I mean, he's the prince, and so he's going around and trying to become more and more popular, essentially. He says in chapter 15, verse 4, he says, "Oh, that I were a judge in the land, that every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice." And so Absalom's really starting to get this hunger for power, for prestige, and he's kind of setting up all the things in play to gain that. And it says, "So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel." And so everyone is just really just admiring what he's doing and likes how he deals with them. He's trending on Twitter. He's getting everything right. And so, and then after several years of this is when he starts to really start to form his coup d'état, if you will. Right.
I mean, we're told in this section that Absalom is the most handsome of David's sons, the most handsome man in Israel.
Yeah.
He's got long flowing hair. He's like a shampoo commercial. He's got a cool car.
Yeah. He's one of very few people that have a chariot, and it's the fastest one.
Yeah. He's got guys who run in front of him shouting his name so that everyone knows Absalom is coming. I mean, I guess that's because he couldn't have a custom horn that plays General Lee. Yeah. It's like that, except guys.
Yeah.
So he's definitely made this play for popularity. Yeah. And even though he's been readmitted into his father's good graces, he immediately uses that to plot. And the way that he plots is by sowing seeds of dissatisfaction among the people. That David won't hear your case. David doesn't care what's going on with you. David's not going to give you justice. Right. But if I were in power, I would be on your side.
Yeah, because clearly, being the enactor of justice is his thing. I mean, we've kind of seen this building over the end of the story.
He has this rep for acting when David wouldn't.
Yeah. So that's exactly it. He starts forming this coup, and a messenger comes to David saying that the hearts of men of Israel have gone after Absalom, and so David starts to flee. he starts to run out of the city and hide because he knows that his son is taking over and forming this coup d'etat. And several of the men of David are wanting to go with him. There's many of them he's saying, no, stay, whatever, right? But many of them do go, but not nearly as many as Absalom has on his side.
Yeah. It's such an interesting move for David to make. He's the king.
Yeah.
He's got a bunch of really strong guys with swords and spears on his side. And as soon as he hears that Absalom has won the favor of the people and has this plan in place, David immediately removes himself from Jerusalem.
Right.
Jerusalem is a fort. Yeah. It's a fort on a mountain.
Yeah.
It has been famously defended from sieges historically. He has an army of not only Israelites but also foreign mercenaries who are loyal. So he not only has soldiers who are loyal to Israel and their tribes, but also that personal loyalty that is owed him by his foreign soldiers. They are loyal to David specifically, not to Israel or Israel's king in general. So why doesn't he stand?
I don't know. I think it's a parenting issue. Right? David should have, when Absalom was young,
military spanking.
He should have spanked him. Right, that's one. But he also should have said, "Hey, you're getting to be older and stronger, and you think you're big enough to take the old man? I mean, you got to do this kind of stuff with your sons. I think it's important."
Yeah.
Anyway,
every once in a while, you got to kind of
put a little bit
hold
of
them down and make them realize that
healthy fear.
They're not
respect.
Yeah.
Something like that.
You got to pin them.
Right. Let them know that. I don't know.
Old Dad still got it.
It says in 2 Samuel chapter 15, verse 12, it's at the end of that verse, it says, "And the conspiracy grew strong, and the people with Absalom kept increasing."
Yeah.
He just kept getting more and more of Israel, and David could see this was happening, and so he knew he needed to go.
Yeah. By going, it means that he doesn't end up actively fighting his son.
Yeah.
Or actively fighting his son's Israelite allies with a military force that has as its core, let's just go ahead and name it, Philistines. They're named in this chapter around verse 18, 1 Samuel 15:18. "And all his servants passed by him, and all the Kerethites, and all the Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had followed him from Gath passed on before the king, and they come with him." So these Gittite, that term means resident of Gath. The Pelethite, that word is related to the word that often gets rendered as Philistine. All right. So he has troops who come from the people surrounding Israel, who've been Israel's rivals. They're on David's payroll. They're loyal to him personally. If he were to stand and fight, you would have the king of Israel fighting Israelites with Philistines.
Right.
It's not a good look.
Yeah.
So maybe it's politically smart for him to run too.
Who knows?
But he does.
So that's the context that this Psalm 3 is written in. This is the point when David is fleeing from Absalom, and this is what's happening. So if we look at Psalm 3, it starts to make a little more sense of what's happening. David flees from his palace, and he crosses over the brook of Kedron. What I think is interesting about that is he's fleeing from those that are out to get him, his own people that are out to get him. Yeah. And he crosses over the brook of Kedron, just like, who else did that?
Oh, wait. Someone else who was going to be betrayed by his
own people. Yeah.
And he and his loyal followers cross the brook of Kedron and go up a mountain.
And end up in a garden, perhaps?
Yeah.
Jesus,
Yes,
right? Jesus
Sunday
does the
school
exact
answer.
same thing, the
Yeah.
Sunday school answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesus does the same, follows the same trek that David did, which I think is very
fascinating.
from his, rebellious people that are following after him. And so the psalm is kind of broken down into four main parts. Each part is 2 verses each. The first part, David is making a complaint to God concerning his enemies. That's verses 1 and 2. The second part is he declares his confidence in the Lord, verses 3 and 4. The third part, he sings of his safety in sleep, verses 5 and 6. And then finally, he ends where he strengthens himself for future conflict in 7 and 8. Let's look at those verses and let's kind of think about what that is. So Dave, why don't you read it? Let's read it.
O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. Selah. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. Selah. I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O God, for you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessings be on your people. Selah.
Amen. So we start out at the very beginning. Oh Lord, how many are my foes? Many rise against me, right? We talked about how, the people that were following Absalom was constantly increasing, growing stronger. And that takes us back to 2 Samuel 15:12, where, these people are continuing to follow Absalom. And he's like, how many are my foes, right?
Yep.
They say, and there is no salvation for him in God. And so he's basically saying, God isn't going to save you. God has turned his back on you. God, even though this terrible thing is happening, God isn't going to be there to rescue you, is what the common theme, the thing that they're saying. His foes are saying this. Kind of like what the people said to Jesus on the cross, right?
Yeah. Exactly like
and it was as though God was not saving him, right? Of course, we know the end of that story.
Yeah. The emphasis on the words of the enemies, not just what they're doing, but also what they're saying is very important to David. They're saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. It's not just a statement about David, it's about God's disposition toward David. And there is in the story of Absalom, as he is fleeing, of the many things that happen, one of them is a verbal ambush. A fellow by the name of Shimei in chapter 16, who is kin to Saul, and so has a grudge, follows him. And as David came, he, Shimei, cursed continually. He threw stones at David and all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And Shimei said, as he cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. Yeah. The Lord has avenged on you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned, and the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. See, your evil is on you, for you are a man of blood.
Yeah.
So it's not just that the enemies have threatened David.
That's right.
It's that very specifically David's status as the Lord's anointed, as the one on whom God's favor rests, has been undercut by this moment.
Right.
And knowing what we know about the previous chapters, in which David sins egregiously and is punished dramatically.
Right.
To what extent might this have been a broad impression?
Right. Because of his sin, this is happening. Right. Yeah. Who Jesus, being the true man of blood, right, covered completely for all sin. All sin was placed on him on the cross, and he was completely innocent. This is the major distinctive between what David is up against and what Jesus did for us on the cross. But essentially, it was because of sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's standing in the place of the one who is cursed.
Yeah.
David is not actually cursed at this moment
Right.
by God, but he is regarded as standing in that place. And so his salvation from God is not just something that he wants for practical reasons. He'd just as soon, not be killed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
After being pursued by soldiers.
Yeah.
But also it's that vindication that this turn of events does not mean that David is the shameful outcast rejected by God that all are saying that he is. That he in fact does have God's favor, that God is his salvation.
Yeah. And then we get to this very interesting piece. This is the first time that we see this in the book of Psalms, but it happens throughout in many places. We see this word Selah.
Yeah.
And this word Selah, the word, we don't really know.
Yeah, it's weird.
We don't really know what it means, right? We have some thoughts of what it means.
There's guesses.
Some people say that it's like a rest, like pause here. Think about this, right? Which is certainly a good thing to do. Anytime you're reading scripture is to stop and think and process and think about that. Another meaning of this word is to lift up the strain or to sing more loudly. Because again, these are songs that would be sung, songs for us to sing. And so at this point, let's stand and sing with gusto, right? It also could mean like change to the next key. Let's increase the key of this. Let's go to the next pitch, right? It could mean that there's a more nobler manner to come. Something more serious, something more important is coming next.
That's interesting.
And so this is the part where you need to retune your harps because the strings on the harp would constantly need to be retuned, kind of like a guitar. Right? This is the time when you take a breather, retune, and then let's go again, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
And so I think that's interesting to think of it in that way. So anytime you see the word Selah, think about what was just said, and then think about what is said after that, and really just be ready to focus in on all that.
Yeah. It means some kind of musical change is accompanying the words and is appropriate for the musical accompaniment of that words. Yeah. What exactly that change is, I knew about the one where it was a rest. I love the idea that this is the one where we crank the volume, or this is the one where we key in tune the guitar to another key, or put the clip on there.
That's right, the capo.
Yeah, put the capo on there. Yeah.
Charles Spurgeon said,
key change.
Charles Spurgeon said, at least we may learn that whenever we see Selah, we should look upon it as a note of observation. Let us read the passage which precedes and succeeds it with greater earnestness. For surely there is always something excellent where we are required to rest and pause and meditate, or when we are required to lift up our hearts in grateful song. Selah.
Very
I think that's great. Yeah, that's a great way to think of it.
Yeah, and just a reminder that at the back of all of this, there is a public performance of music, of singing set to instrumental accompaniment, and that those who have arranged this book of Psalms have given careful consideration to how the music fits with the words, enhances the act of singing the words, so that those who sing, those who hear, their hearts are lifted up in truth. It's really cool. So even if there is some mystery in this ancient Hebrew musical notation, we can be confident that they are wanting to make the same kinds of decisions that we should be making in our music when we worship.
Yeah. So the next section, but you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. This shield that it's talking about is not just the type of shield that we typically think of, like Captain America's shield, this little round thing or whatever.
He's not going to throw it at anybody?
No. It's not even like the shield that would cover your whole body, like you stand in front of it and crouch down a little bit. It's more of a shield that completely surrounds you, is the idea of what this shield is. a buckler roundabout, protection that surrounds you entirely. Almost like I picture it like a wooden barrel maybe, but also on top. I think it's just more of like this complete shield. The shield of the Lord is not just something, a lot of times we talk about, in Ephesians when it talks about the full armor of God, and we usually mention how there's not any armor for the back of us, right?
I think we might actually see an image of this.
Yeah.
In 2 Samuel, when it describes Shimei throwing rocks at him, and it says, all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left.
Yeah.
Like he's surrounded by armored bodyguards.
Right.
Probably with shields around him.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
But isn't it great that he doesn't say, but you, O Lord, are with me when all of my mighty men are my shield, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He says, you are the shield, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great. The glory and the lifter of my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I cried aloud to the Lord. He answered me in his holy hill. And then we have this other
the
saying.
holy hill of Jerusalem.
Yeah, the holy hill of Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm. Selah. His ability to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
I lay down and slept. I woke up again, for the Lord sustained me.
Mm-hmm.
I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to sleep peacefully comes up again in several Psalms.
Yeah.
Especially in the face of overwhelming existential threat for which the psalmist declares he has no human recourse.
That's right.
The ability to sleep in the face of Godzilla.
Yeah.
Or, vast, overwhelming danger.
Yeah. So you think about when we have stresses of life or difficult situations that we're in, God gives us this ability to lay down and sleep as we trust in Him, right? We recognize that He is this shield around us. He is watching over us. He hears our cry. He answers us, and He lets us sleep.
Yeah.
Something that we so desperately need. I think when we sleep, we close our eyes and we essentially give all complete trust that God is going to handle whatever takes place when I'm out.
Yeah.
Right? That's certainly. Can we go back just a little bit?
Oh, yeah,
to verse
absolutely.
4. I forgot to mention. Verse 4 says, I cried aloud to the Lord. I think about this aloud, right? Because many times when we pray silently when we're by ourselves. We pray out loud in front of people. But he says here, I cried aloud to the Lord. And certainly David could pray silently and God still answered. But there's something about him crying aloud. And I think even as we are by ourselves in prayer, I think that it would be a great exercise for us to continue to cry aloud, not just cry silently in our heart, right? I think there's something to that that I think we should pay attention to.
Not that God needs you to do that so He can hear.
Not at all.
But I think it's an expression of the degree to which David both earnestly feels the threat of the moment and earnestly feels that calling upon God is the effective and only recourse.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. There's nothing else I can do, and yet there's nothing else I need to do.
Yeah.
Right.
That's really cool.
So then back in verse 6, I will not be afraid of many thousands of people. Because again, there are so many people coming after him.
Yep.
And he recognizes it, right? He laid down and slept, but he awoke. He awoke again, for the Lord sustained him in this sleep, which I think is important for us to have that sustainment.
Of the thousands of people, this is just kind of emphasizing the danger that he's under. His most popular son has turned on him. That prophecy that Nathan had made back in chapter 12 about his neighbor taking his wives before the sun out openly. That happens as the concubines of David, the sort of lesser wives of David, are left behind in the palace to maintain it. And his son Absalom publicly violates them. at the advice of a man who had been David's advisor.
Right.
This man named Ahithophel turns on David.
Yeah.
And now advises his son. And apparently Ahithophel is just this Machiavellian mastermind. And his advice is, Absalom, you need to commit this awful public sin of violating your father's wives, so that everyone knows that you've burned your bridges and you've committed to this, right? So that everyone that you're asking to stick their neck out for you in a revolution,
right,
in a coup, knows that you're sticking your neck out too.
Right.
That you can't just sort of at the last minute back off and say, "Oh, just kidding, Dad."
Yeah.
All these people led me into it,
Right.
So Ahithophel says,
Yeah.
do this act in order to show
Right.
you have no interest in making peace.
Yeah.
But in doing so, it brings to pass what Nathan had said.
That's right.
The shame of the house of David is complete, and it is public, and it's awful.
Yeah.
So his son has turned on him.
Right.
His one of his most trusted advisors has turned on him. He has, even though the priest wanted to follow him into exile with the ark, he said that's not appropriate. Leave it in the tabernacle in Jerusalem. So he's left God behind. He knows he hasn't left God behind.
Right.
But symbolically, in people's eyes, the presence of God is marked by the ark. The ark is still in Jerusalem. So cut off from son, cut off from trusted advisor, cut off even from the manifest sacred presence of God. David couldn't be any further away from the throne than he is at this moment.
Yeah. So here he is again. He's prayed. He's cried aloud to the Lord. He went to sleep. God sustained him in his sleep. He wakes up not being afraid because he knows that God is with him. And then he says, "Arise, O Lord. Save me, O God." He knows that God is his only hope. He knows not to venture out into battle without prayer. He knows that he should go to his knees first and cry aloud to God. That his only hope and his confidence is in the Lord. And salvation, that it can only be found in him. He says, "For you strike all my enemies on their cheek and break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Our blessing be on our people. Selah." I think it's interesting that David we've noticed this earlier in this lesson. David talks about the teeth.
Yeah.
Right? It's like he's fixated with teeth. Some people they're a teeth person.
Yeah.
I think David is just one of those people.
Well, it's an image in the last psalm that we looked at, Psalm 57. It was an image of the speech, the damaging speech of particular people. He may have some of that sense here too, but many psalms of deliverance will talk about being delivered from the mouths of lions or from the horns of bulls. This idea of threatening predators.
Yeah.
It's pretty common imagery. But the teeth in this particular case, also the striking of enemies on the cheek,
right?
That's not really a killing blow. That's a rebuke blow.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's within the context of the story, within the context of the psalm. Perhaps this is you've spoken wrongly of me and of God. God's going to be the one who backhands you for it.
Yeah. And I think verse 8, salvation belongs to the Lord. This is really kind of a understanding of the doctrine of salvation and the doctrine of God, that he is sovereign. That salvation is ultimately his. It comes from the Lord. No salvation comes except from the Lord. It's not on any work that we can do. It's not on any merit that we have. It's all because of him.
This is really interesting the way that psalm ends in light of the way this story ends. Eventually, there is a military conflict between Absalom and Absalom's forces and David's forces, and this is it reaches the point where it's necessary. David is initially wanting to go into battle with them, with his general Joab, but they tell him at the beginning of chapter 18, verse 3, "You shall not go out, for if we flee, they will not care about us. If half of us die, they will not care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore it is better that you send us help from the city." And so the king abides by their advice. He does not go out to battle. And this is very similar to the situation that we saw with Saul, that ultimately, no matter how often Saul pursues David, David never actually directly confronts Saul militarily.
Right.
And here, even though forces that are loyal to David are confronting the forces of Absalom, it isn't David personally. David personally does not seek the life of his enemies, and in fact tells Joab to deal gently with the young man Absalom for my sake. He wants Absalom spared, ultimately. It's an interesting thing to set that attitude alongside of these psalms, because often these psalms of deliverance that talk about the enemies of the psalmist in very absolute ways, right? They are the enemy, they are the evil one, they are lions, they are, they're spoken of in kind of ultimate absolute terms.
Sure.
The predators, the ultimate evil. And sometimes the book of Psalms and those moments in the book of Psalms are held up as, see, the Bible has this kind of rhetoric of violence where the righteous are just supposed to eliminate all of the wicked, and all of you Bible believers are just waiting
to be crusaders again.
To just go crusading and kill all the sinners. But if you set that psalm aside, beside what David actually does, this isn't his violent rhetoric to justify his own kind of annihilation policy against his enemies. In fact, it's very different from that.
Well, in fact, he says, "You strike all my enemies. You break their teeth." Right. And salvation belongs to the Lord. It's not, I'm going to do this on your behalf. Right? So this psalm is great for us to be able to sing, to read, to pray when there are situations in our life where we need salvation, we need deliverance, we need help from God. When there are those that are coming against us in any kind of way, we can pray this psalm. And remember that he is a shield to us. Good. So next, this coming Sunday, we'll look at great minds, Psalms of Moses and Solomon. Yes.
It's going to be cool.
So it's going to be great. Join us on Sunday, 10 a.m., room 205.